A1C, I don't really, when it comes to look, a lot of people worry about hemoglobin A1C. I personally don't on a carnivore diet. I think the only thing that can actually raise blood sugar levels is if you're cheating a lot and stuff like that. If you're keeping it pretty clean, not an issue. And there is about 24% of the population, like me, I'm one of them. I've done a video on that covering how low serum calcium, some people like myself who have got pastoral genes don't absorb calcium very well. And so we need a bit of, dairy products to get our calcium levels up. And I know that because when I went paleo, I had high slight arrhythmias and a higher heart rate. And when I put the dairy back in and get the calcium and my serum calcium goes up, it rectifies that and it brings down my blood sugars as well into the 4 millimole range. If I don't have any, my blood sugars go above the 5 millimole range. So it can be a serum calcium issue as well. So it can be a bit more complicated. So rather than milk doing the wrong thing, the calcium in it will probably do the right thing for you. Now, obviously, if you consume, liters and liters like Zach does, and the more sugar you get in, obviously, it's going to be more problematic. Now, obviously, when we look at galactose, which is the other half, like lactose is half galactose, half glucose. Now, that galactose is not sucrose. It's not fructose. It's converted to glucose. So technically speaking, at the end of the day, both galactose or galactose will turn into glucose. So, so it doesn't behave the same way. It doesn't have the same glycating effect. It doesn't have the same issues. But obviously, the more sugar you consume of any source, it's potentially going to raise the amount. But if you're only doing 1 or 2 glasses of milk, it's just too low, the amount in that regard. You're talking about 25 grams of carbohydrates for 2 glasses. Even less, actually, because a glass is 244. And we're talking about that's 488 grams equivalent or milliliters. So at that sort of range, 2 glasses of milk is going to be neither here or there. Even with, you sort of, if we look at the regular, because usually the raw one that I get is about 3.8, but let's just take the general commercial stuff about 4.88, about 24.4. So you can still be in ketosis at that level and have normal blood sugar, So I don't think it's a problem. Now, obviously, on a carnivore diet, what we've actually found is our red blood cells live for longer. And that's what also means that when red blood cells circulate longer, they tend to become slightly more glycated. So the A1C goes up, but when we actually look at a continuous glucose monitor, our levels tend to be in the 4 millimole range, below 5. Many people who have done this experiment, they've found their A1C being slightly higher than somebody on keto or when they were keto. And then they look at the day-to-day from a glucose monitor and it's not. And they go, why is that the case? Well, simply put, the reason for that is because your red blood cells are now surviving longer and so have got the potential to be glycated a bit more. That doesn't mean your serum levels of glucose are high continuous. So, yeah, it's not, for carnivores, it's not a very accurate measure, A1C, personally. That's my personal view, and there are many others that have come across along to that, because it just doesn't make sense how you can actually have, relatively low levels of blood sugar on a glucose monitor and then end up with a higher A1C that somebody who's pretty much before having slightly higher on a low carb diet compared to a carnivore diet, but having a lower A1C. It's the contradiction. It's the opposite. So, it's quite clear that the red blood cells are surviving longer because of the better nutrition. And as a consequence of that, they're getting slightly more glycated. But that's not an issue for us. At the end of the day, what we're concerned is how much, not so much the red blood cells, but the endothelium. That means your blood vessels. Are they being overglycated? If they are, then that's a problem. We know that glycocalyx, those little hairline things, they can collapse for up to 6 hours from a lot of sugar. So that's a problem. And then it opens up the artery for assaults and more stickiness. So, yeah, because those little hairline things create a negative charge that, so things don't become sticky, don't get attracted. They bounce off that pericellular matrix around your LDL, around your all the different, even whatever organisms may be running through your bloodstream. All those have got a pericellular matrix with a negative charge and, negative. But if you collapse those, then you create a more positive charge, which you can actually stick things to. And that could create problems. Well, we know it. If you cause problems to the endothelium, you will create problems.